Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes. On the Rebirth server, we are with our level 19, almost level 20, Stalker, Psyop, and we are looking for clockworks here in Fault Line, which we should be able to find fairly easily at the construction sites. And as we go, it's time for another Let's Rant, and by the way, you'll see some presents. It's the holiday event. Let's go ahead and open one. Um, don't know how tough this is going to be in this zone. We'll see. Not too bad. It's actually, nah, it's alright. Not too bad. Mostly hard because can't be a stalker, you're unhidden, but that's okay. We're fine. So we're doing a Let's Rant. And today what I want to do is actually, very recently, around the time of this filming, December 1st, 2022, Luke Hart made a video on the DM Lair. He was doing a Q&A, and he was talking about a variety of things regarding the Unearthed Arcana for 1D&D, which I don't want to get into. But he said some very interesting and profound things, and I would like to focus this rant on um, basically, and this is not just D&D, the high-level game in many role-playing games, and why the high-level game ends up not being that great, not being that enjoyable to play, and actually not being people's favorite. He quoted a survey which I've not personally seen, but he said Wizards of the Coast apparently has done surveys, and their results show that, and I'm looking at my notes here just to double check this, that players' least favorite levels are 1 and 2, and everything 10 and up. Like, the players like levels 3 to 9, basically. Interestingly, I've mentioned this before, there's a game called Five Torches Deep, which is a D&D reskin that simplifies Dungeons & Dragons, and takes a lot of the complication out of it, but also caps everything at level 9. You can't go above that. Basically, the premise is it's not any fun over level 9, so we're not going to bother to do that. And you can't really do regular dungeon diving at level 9, so we're not going to bother to do that. And so this mirrors the results, or maybe they did this after seeing those results of the Wizards of the Coast study that Luke is mentioning here, that a lot of players don't really care for the level 9 and up game. And even in my campaign, my best friend loves the high level game, but at least two of the other players said they don't. One of them in one of the sessions, as we were hitting like level, I think we had hit level 7 or something, or maybe we'd hit level 8, and my best friend was like, "Yes, level 8, awesome!" And the one his really good friend that he got playing with us, he played the Aarakocra Cleric, said, actually my favorite levels are levels 5 to 8. He said he feels like by level 5 your character's kind of really come into its own. You've got the signature, most of the signature abilities of your class. Your cleric plays like a cleric now and couldn't be mistaken for a druid or a bard or something, and your wizard plays like a wizard and has a starting to get spells in his spell book and has a few levels worth of spells. And your fighter's getting 2 attacks per round. So you're feeling like a pretty beefy member of your class by level 6, 7, 8, but you're not over the top superhero, which you are once you're in the double digits. And you're not super weak like you are at level 1 or 2. And so he said he sort of used like levels 1 to 3 as the tutorial levels, and then like 4, 5 to 8 are kind of like where you're really playing your class. And then above that, he's sort of ambivalent. He said, I don't really care. And then the newest player in our group, not the newest member, because that person's played since 2nd edition, but the person who's the new player, she's been with us the whole 3 years, she said to me privately, in a conversation that we had offline, just over the phone, she said that she prefers, kind of the same, maybe even a lower range, like levels 4, 5, 6. 3, she was a ranger. 3, she got her pet. She really liked that. She was happy to have her pet, which was a giant panther, and she loved that animal. But then she said kind of, 4, 5, 6, she's starting to get a couple of spells, starting to be able to cast Cure Wounds and things like that, and speak with animals. And so she sort of liked that stuff. And then after it got over 6 or so, she said what she started noticing is that they just kind of became unkillable. Like, she no longer it's funny because she was still super cautious about everything, but she said, like, kind of once the cleric got Revivify and she realized what he had, it was no longer exciting to get into battle, or as exciting to get into battle, because she kind of always knew that even if she went to 0 hit points, there was going to be somebody around to wake her back up, and that it didn't seem as dangerous. And her character seemed to be, again, for lack of a better term, though she didn't use this word since she's not a fan of comic books, like a superhero. And so there was this sort of reduction in fun as it got too high of a level. And I don't think she really liked the level 11, 12, 13 game anywhere near as much as she liked the low-level game. And she in fact said one of the things she was looking forward to in our movement away from my campaign, which she very much enjoyed, and she said she was going to miss, to the new campaign is, hey, we're going back to low level, and my character's not going to have all this stuff anymore. It's not going to be as complicated, and it's just not going to be as super powered. And so it's certainly not everybody feels this way, and lots of people want to go to level 20, but apparently the majority of Wizards of the Coast people who answer surveys anyway, told them the same thing. Like, we actually kind of like levels like 3 to 9 the best. And again, the people who made 5 Torches Deep apparently felt the same way, because they stopped that at level 9, and they sort of say flat out in their literature about their game that there's no point to playing dungeon delving D&D after level 9, just because your character becomes so powerful that, like, it's just too powerful for the dungeon delving. And so, are we in a story arc for this guy, or is he just giving me junk missions? It looks like he's giving me junk. Yeah, he's giving me junk, so we're going to get off him. Just complete that. I'm not doing that again. And we've leveled up. And we got a new contact. So we will go to her instead of him. And meanwhile, it's time to level up. So, so there's this, I don't want to say there's a consensus, but there certainly is a non-rare and pretty common opinion by a lot of folks that the high-level game in D&D is not that great. Now, I don't think it's the same in every game, but I think this is a problem in most level-based games. That when you level up, they have to keep making you more powerful as you level up in very substantive ways, in ways that are clear, so that the growth of your character is clear. I mean, after all, I would say it's true in City of Heroes as well. Wait a minute now. I gotta see what I'm doing. This is Boggle or Heightened Senses? Is this a toggle? Gosh, another toggle? All right, let's stay off the toggle for now. The Boggle is confused. Yeah, we'll do that. Oh gosh, all this. All right, so let me just hang on. Let me reorganize, and I'm ready to go here. Okay, so so City of Heroes is kind of the same way, right? You start out, your character is doing, training enhancers, and then dual origin enhancers, and then single, and then you're doing invention, and eventually you get into Hamadon raids and task forces and stuff, and it definitely changes, right? The upper level game, I have said, like 40 plus, not my favorite in City of Heroes, because the missions turn into all these outdoor missions, and they get very grindy, and they're huge maps and everything, and some of that's just done because, like, they don't have any other way to challenge you as your character levels up. So you get so powerful that your character is taking on purples. Like, this character's still in the range of taking on, yellows and maybe oranges, but in another 10 levels, she's going to be taking on reds. And by level 40, she's going to be taking on purples and deep purples and, one-shotting them. And it just becomes sort of ridiculous, right? She doesn't feel like a stalker at that point. She feels like a god. And I signed up to play a superhero, not a goddess, right? And so this is a common problem, a common issue with many level-based games, right? Level-based games, because they have to scale you up, right? Oh, Dr. Lila, we're here. Let's do Dr. Lila. Because they have to scale you up at every single level, and you have to get quantitatively more powerful at every level. You have to get more hit points at every level. You have to get more stats at every level. You have to get more damage at every level. You have to be able to attack more often at every level. You have to get more spells at every level. Your spells have to get more powerful at every level, because otherwise level 10 is no different from level 2, so why are you having levels? Right? That is a major problem with level-based games. And I think that um, that power creep is not as much of an issue in a free-form game. So, for example, in Champions, right, you could play a character from 200 to 400 points and never increase their D6 of damage or their PDED. Just give them more skills, right? You branch them out. You could give them more powers. You could reduce their endurance costs. You could increase their non-figured characteristics like their recovery and their presence and their comeliness. We actually had a player who did this. One of my friends, his character Assaulter, who was this like sort of mutant ninja, sort of mutant martial artist. We wouldn't allow him to go above 14d6 of damage, and he got it like right away. Like we let him, he went up too early. I GM'd him at first. It was just him and me playing during study period, and I let him go up to 14d6. So when he joined the group, everybody else was 12. He was 14, so he had to just sit there at 14d6. So he just started rounding his character out. Right, his character that had a 25 Constitution, it went up to a 30, and his character that had like a 12 or 13 presence, eventually he had like a 25 presence, and so he had a whole bunch of really rounded stats. He had comeliness. Nobody bothered to invest in comeliness. He had a really high ego for a martial artist. He was walking around like a 20 ego, right? Because and it was hard to hit. Even an egoist would have a hard time to hit him, right? Because we wouldn't let him go up in the combat stats. He just went up in the other stats. And so that actually was made his character more balanced, if you want to call it that. It had very few vulnerabilities. Let's see how this confusion works. He had very few vulnerabilities, but he wasn't he supposed to be confused? Why was he still attacking me? He had very few vulnerabilities, but he wasn't overpowered because we just said, look, you can't gain any more stun, and you can't gain any more defenses, and you can't gain any more attack, right? So he gained different attacks. He gained different attacks, but he didn't gain more powerful ones, right? So he got a whip, and he got healing, and he got all this other weird... I mean, it did lead to a lot of weird out-of-concept powers for his character, most of which was just power gaming and min-maxing. But his character never got so powerful that it couldn't play with the rest of the group, right? And that's because since it wasn't level-based, and it wasn't like bringing, say, a 5th level character into a 1st level party, where the guy's already got 5 times as many hit points as you. It is because Champions just doesn't work that way. It's not a level-based game. And so I think that Champions could potentially, depending on the on how rigid and disciplined the GM is, and how willing the players are to accept that level of discipline from him or her, it's entirely possible to play Champions for practically ever without your characters getting so powerful that there's no point to playing them. It just depends on what the GM allows, and that's all basically GM discretion and player discretion and that sort of thing. So I just want to see if this guy, he didn't attack his friends, right? So what's going on with this power? I will get back to that, but will attack their allies. Attack your boggle target, increased chance of... That's weird. If he why was he still attacking me though? Anyway, so I think that this is more of a problem in level-based games than in freeform games. In freeform games, it can happen, but it depends on the players and the GM. In level-based games, it will happen. No matter what you do, you will get into this really high power level. And so then Luke was asked in the chat, well, why is it bad? Like, what is bad about high-level games that people don't like? And he said the high-level game is poor. And then he was at, like, why? And he was asked, what things make it poor? And he named two, and then he actually named a third one, which I think is by far the worst of the three. So before I say what it is, if you have played the high level game of a role playing game like D&D that's level based, and you have found it maybe lacking in some way or not as cool as you thought it would be, not as fun as the low level game or the mid level game, go ahead and ask, like, come up yourself with one or two or three, if you want, reasons why you think the high level game is not as fun as people think it is, or as it could be. What things? Why is it like actually less fun than the low to mid level game? If you think so, right? I mean, you don't have to agree with me, but if you agree with me and you think that, come up with your reasons. Maybe pause the video, think about it a little bit, and then unpause it, and I'll talk about what Luke said, and basically I agree with him, but I'll talk about what Luke said and why he said the high level game is lacking, and that Wizards of the Coast for D&D needs to work on it. But I would argue that this is an issue for many different games. So go ahead and pause it, come up with your reasons, and come on back when you're ready. Okay, I'm assuming you've come up with your reasons now. If you already have, I don't know if people want to do this. I feel like kind of interactive. You can post in the comments what your reasons were, and see how they're similar to mine and Luke's. The first one he said was immediately the first one I thought of. Right, having played D&D just to level 13, I saw this happen by level 7 or 8, and definitely by the double digits. And he said that the number one problem is that that high level abilities and the things that the characters can do at those levels add bog. Not boggle, bog. Right? They make the game slow down. Characters can do so much. They have so many options at high level. Now this guy's attacking his buddy. That's good. They have so many options at high level. They can do so much at high level. And many of their abilities at their high level abilities are complicated or require some real understanding on the part of both the player and the GM. Long, complicated spell descriptions like wish and how they work. And so if you're playing by the rules, at least, it adds bog. Bog in terms of interpreting the rules, bog in terms of players having so many options that even when they're trying really hard to think ahead and plan ahead, because so much can happen in a single turn with a high level character, I saw this happen even at 4th level, right? And it's worse for me as a player, and it's worse at higher level. You're sitting there planning it out. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to attack this guy from behind, flanking, and by the time your turn comes up, that is not an option anymore, right? Because the whole battlefield has changed by then, right? And so now you have to completely change what you're planning to do as your turn is going, and you've got all these options, and you're completely overwhelmed with all the options on your character sheet. You've got 6 different potions in your pouches that you're carrying. You've got single-use magic items, scrolls. You've got all of these special class and feat abilities. You've got umpteen spells to choose from if you're a magic user. And multiple things you could target. You could do an AoE. You could do a single target. There are so many variables, so many, that it just slows the game down. Everybody's round takes longer. And the villains have so many complicated abilities that as a GM you have to prep for. You have to sit there and read ahead of time, and even if you have during the battle, you still have to double check everything. As I mentioned, I think in an earlier video, even though I made up a lot of my own powerful legendary monsters toward the end of my campaign, I still had to bone up on my own monster abilities that I had created the morning before we played or the evening before we played, just to make sure I had all those abilities in my head. And guys, I still messed up. I still forgot regeneration for one guy and magic resistance for another, and it's just because there are so many moving parts, and there's so much complexity to the high level monsters and characters. It bogs the game down, and everything slows down. It just grinds to a halt. Now this again is in level-based games. If you can see it in City of Heroes, that doesn't really add bog because this is a computer game, but you can see it in City of Heroes. Look at all these abilities I have. When I started out, all I had was this one, right? This one and that toggle, and it was just click and brawl, click and brawl, click and brawl. That level of simplicity is what you get in D&D as well at low levels. And then at high levels, you're sitting here with like so many toggles and buttons and stuff that you can fill up 3 trays on the bottom and 2 on each side, right? And again, that's increasing the complexity. Now, in a game like City of Heroes, you're just going really fast, by just clicking faster because the battle doesn't take any longer, right? But um, but in a game like D&D, where everything is being handled manually by the players, right, and the GM, it's um, it's just going to add bog. It slows the game down. I mean, you could see it in my game where the sorcerer had the ability to animate objects, and a couple of the other characters could summon something, and you could, have 2 familiars, a celestial, a spiritual weapon, and 8 animated objects on the board. All of them can go on their own round, and that's not even gotten to one of the players yet. And then however many monsters there are, and it's just simply not possible to have that many tokens on the board in a low-level battle because the characters don't have the resources to bring all of that stuff out. But in a high-level battle, it's out every single time because they have so many spell slots and they can cast them so many times. There's going to be some of those every time, and all of them some of the times, and consequently, it bogs things down. So one of the reasons that Luke said that I completely agree with, and it was the first thing I thought of, was bog. It slows the game down. It makes it I'm sorry, there's no other way. It makes it boring, right? The battles become a slog instead of a fun, exciting fight. They take longer. It can take half a session to do a single medium difficulty battle. So this was his first point, and I agree with it. So that's one of the 3. The second thing he said, and it was he said I have 2, and he said 2 of them, but then he actually came up with the third that I thought was actually the most important of the 3 that I didn't think of, but as soon as he said it, I was like, yes, that's true. So, oh man, this is an elite boss. All right, so we're going to take some inspirations, and I'm going to stab him, and then I'm going to confuse the other guy. So one of the things that high-level game absolutely does is it adds to bog. Okay. The second thing he said, which I think was also correct, okay, and equally important, is that the high-level game is much more difficult for the game master in terms of balance because the challenge rating system breaks down at high level. It simply doesn't function, right? And I think I might have mentioned this in one of my other videos where, my players by even 5th level were able to fight double the CR of what it says, right? They could fight level, CR 10 monsters, right? And by level 9 they were beating CR 18 monsters, and by level 11 they could beat a CR 25 monster, right? Then the challenge rating completely breaks down. And he said the reason this is important is not just, oh, you can't challenge them. It's that you're supposed to be able to use the challenge rating and other metrics in the book to scale how hard a challenge is, how hard a battle is. So, you want a variety of difficulties. You say, I'll make this battle hard, this battle medium, and this battle easy. And he said, you can do that at the lower level. Now, I haven't done a lot of high-level GMing. But he said you can do that at low level. But at the high levels, what happens is you can be, as a GM, completely blindsided by how easy or hard a battle is. You can put in a battle that you think will be hard, and they just wipe it in a round. And then you can put in another battle that you think will be easy, and it actually takes a long time. It's a lot harder than you thought. And it's because the metrics that they give you to estimate the difficulty of what you're giving the party to do simply don't work after 10th or 12th level. They're just not well done enough. And I do agree that that's hard. I never personally experienced thinking it was going to be hard and it came out easy and it came out too hard. Every single battle that I ran after about 9th level ended up being easier than I thought it would be. I put in stuff where it's like, I don't know if these guys are going to survive, and they handled it no problem. Even like the final boss, I honestly, when I was looking at him, I'm like, given his abilities, I don't know what's going to happen to him. Now, he did take 2 of the characters out of the 5 down to 0 hit points at different points in the battle, just briefly. That was the only battle in which more than one person went to 0 hit points in the entire campaign. So he was obviously the toughest enemy. And at the end of the first round, oops, I went the wrong way. At the end of the first round, I actually thought he might beat them because they'd gone an entire round and his lair abilities were such that they hadn't struck a single blow against him, and he caught them in his like necrotic breath and took like 3 of them down half their hit points. And I thought, this is going to be brutal. Like 3 of them are at half hit points and they haven't touched him. At the end of the second round, they hadn't done much to him, and he had taken one of them to 0 hit points. And I thought, this could be a wipe. I did the third round, he was down to like a quarter of his hit points. They finally got a beat on him, and once they started hitting him, that was the end of it, right? And yeah, it was a fun battle, but I would say it was medium hard. It was not a deadly battle, which is what I thought. I mean, like the metrics said, it was deadly plus. This guy was like would have calculated out something like challenge rating 27 or something, and they were level 13, and they crushed him. Right? They struggled until to sort of find their range on him, and once they sort of figured him out, third round they just pounded him, and by the fourth round he was dead. And so, that was much easier than I thought it was going to be. And it was certainly way easier than the metrics would have said. But I wasn't even looking at the metrics. I was just looking at his abilities and his lair actions and saying, oh, these are brutal. And they were pretty brutal, but the players figured it out. And there was a battle before that where they were in a trapped room, a room with like multiple traps and a death knight. And I thought that guy was going to be brutal because of the traps. And they handled that with no problem. I mean, they crushed him in 2 rounds. He was dead in 2 rounds. Even though they got hit by a couple of the traps, yeah, it did nothing to them. Like, didn't do enough to them, and they just crushed him. Oh, I forgot the Raider Engineers. So, so that's the second thing that Luke said, is that it's too hard to calibrate the difficulty so that the challenge is the challenge that you as a DM want it to be, right? And sometimes it's way harder or way easier than you wanted, and that can be frustrating, especially as a new GM. Although most new GMs aren't going to be running a high-level game, still it can be frustrating. So those are the 2 things that he said originally. But then he talked about something that I think is by far the most important issue. And this depends on the game. It's not just whether it's level-based. Because you could see me doing this with this character if I wanted to, starting at level 1. But in D&D it's level-based, and in a lot of games it's level-based. And what he said was, high-level abilities allow you to basically skip the game, right? If I wanted to, in this mission, or in a mission without an NPC to follow me around, I would be able to just skip the entire game, right? Go right to the final boss and take out the final boss and skip the whole mission, right? And so he actually brought up the same issue that WebDM brought up, and I'll tell this story again briefly. The idea that you can use scrying and teleport to basically bypass the entire dungeon. And he said, yes, that is problem solving on the part of the players, and it might be very good tactics. But as a DM, you're still sitting there going, but I spent hours and hours working on the rooms and the descriptions and the NPCs of this dungeon, and these guys just skipped the whole thing. And that's an awful lot of work to be wasted like that. Now, you know, you could maybe use it somewhere else, sure, but you were planning to use it here, and you had a whole cool thing ready to go, and now you can't do it because these guys bypassed it. And that's what happened with WebDM, right? It was a level 20 dungeon. They were saying it was a friend of theirs. He said, like the players are all like, we never get high level. So he said, all right, I'll make you guys a level 20 dungeon, and we'll play for the next 3 or 4 sessions. And he made an old school classic dungeon where you start at the top, and you're going to work your way down through 4 or 5 levels. And when you get to the bottom level, there's the boss, and he's got whatever item they were looking for. And he figured he would wear them down, and by the time they fought the boss, they'd be at like half or 1/3 strength, and he figured this will be a cool challenge. And instead, the players scryed the boss. He's scrying to see where the boss was, used the ability to see the boss to teleport, and they teleported to his lair, is like the bottom of the dungeon, and just killed him and teleported out and brought the mayor of the town or whatever the magic item that they were looking for, and they were done in like an hour. And the fight was super easy because they hadn't been worn down. So they had this one easy fight, and that's all they did. And the GM's like, what the hell? Right? I did all this work with his 5 levels of this dungeon, carefully crafting it to wear them down, and they just ignored the whole thing. They skipped the content. And so what Luke said is, because the high level game gives your character abilities that allow you to skip content, you can basically, how did he say this? You are unable to experience a number of very basic parts of the game of D&D, right? The sort of crawling through dungeons and even fighting certain types of monsters and stuff isn't going to happen because you just bypass it all, right? And so I think that's actually really important, and it's a weakness of some types of high level of games that have high level, like actual levels with high level play, right? There's no guarantee in Champions that a character is ever going to be able to have powers that allow them to skip content, right? I mean, you could possibly get extra dimensional movement with enough points, and you could potentially use it to time travel and solve your problems, but that would require a GM allowing extra dimensional movement, allowing the time travel option, and giving you the ability to do that. As opposed to D&D, where if you're a wizard and you get to level whatever it is, 13, that lets you get 7th level spells, you get teleport. Unless the GM wants to ban the spell, rules is written, the GM can't do anything to stop you from getting scrying and teleport and bypassing every part of every dungeon that you don't want to do. It's not possible for the GM to stop you without doing some kind of a targeted ban of that spell. Whereas in Champions, it says right in the extra dimensional movement power, how this power works is up to the GM. And the GM doesn't have to allow time travel, right? So they give the GM the discretion right there in the text of these game-breaking powers, whereas D&D just gives you the game-breaking powers. And yes, they would probably say, well, it's understood that a GM has the right to ban it, like I banned Wish from my game, right? As a spell. You could still use it, cast it off of a magic item, and the party did. That's how they won the campaign. But I banned it as a spell because I wanted them to have to find the magic item of wishing and use the item, right? But rules is written, if they had gotten to 17th level, they could have taken wish, and the GM kind of has to accept that. And so it's not just that there are these sort of game-breaking powers, these powers that allow you, like I always call it game-breaking, but what Luke says, I think, is more accurate. It's not, like the reason it's game-breaking, And I think somebody asked me that in my game breaking video. Like, if you're just playing the game, how can you break the game? Well, they wrote the game broken, right? They wrote the game, and it's not just D&D. Like games with levels allow you to break it in a sense by giving you, and this is the key here, by giving you abilities within the game that enable your character to skip parts of the game, right? To not have to actually play through parts of the game. So now you're playing less D&D, right? Because you're not doing those parts of the game. Right? So Luke's description is you have these fundamental basic elements of Dungeons and Dragons, like mapping and crawling through dungeons and negotiating with merchants to get better prices on deals and stuff in the shops, and all of that stuff that you're doing gets substituted in by magical spells, and you don't have to do it anymore, right? Let's just skip that part, right? So it's like being a stalker, turning on hide, right? Stalking to the final boss of the mission, right? And just one-shotting the boss and walking out. Mission over. Now, I will do that if it's an annoying mission, right? If it's one of these, I will absolutely do that on the outdoor missions in high level because I don't like those missions. But I'm not doing it here. Or I'm not skipping the content here. I'm playing the content here because why would I want to skip the content of the game I'm playing? Like, City of Heroes is a dead game, right? I'm playing on a pirated server, right? With potentially dangerous software, right? It's like pirated stuff. I'm relying on these like hackers who are running the game, right? I'm relying on them to not like put malicious code into their client and stuff that screws with my computer. I mean, there's a whole issue about this, right? I'm still way out of date using the cream soda, launcher to launch City of Heroes because that's the one that like has worked for me. But a couple of years ago, the guys from, I think it was 4chan, like I trust them, put out a different thing called Sweet Tea. And the reason they put that out was they said there was a potential to have an exploit happen to your computer with a bad XML manifest that could basically execute malicious code right from the launcher and do all kinds of bad stuff to your computer. Now, fortunately, that hasn't happened to me, but I'm taking a potential risk on my computer of malicious code and that sort of thing so that I can play City of Heroes, right? Why in the world, after doing all that, would I want to skip playing City of Heroes while I'm playing City of Heroes? So of course I'm not going to just stealth my way through this mission, kill the final boss, and get out. I'm here to play this mission. I'm here to kill not kill, all of these guys. Now, there are some annoyances with having an NPC follow you around, and I kind of make a mini game of it in this mission. Can I keep Dr. Lila alive? Because she's very hard to keep alive. She's very squishy for a tank. We'll see if we can keep her alive in this room. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. I probably won't be able to with this character because we're a stalker and we're not going to be able to taunt them out. The bad guy is over there, so it all depends on whether Dr. Lila knocks somebody toward him and chases him. If she does, she will aggro this elite boss, and I will not be able to save her because I don't have a taunt. I don't think I need that anymore. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Right, but why would I want to like skip the whole entire rest of this mission? Maybe the whole story arc. Okay, I can see why I would want to skip the generators, right? But why would I want to skip this whole mission and just stalk to here? Now that's not a high level ability. It's actually a low level ability that lets you do that. for a Stalker. But in many games, what happens is the high-level abilities are the abilities that you get that allow you to bypass, to actually skip content in the game, right? And the question always becomes, can I please defeat this thing? The question always becomes, why would you want to skip the content of the game you're playing? Don't you like the game, right? And it's a constant issue. Now she's going to aggro him. It's a constant issue because there are so many abilities that will let you basically do this, right? That's why I call it breaking the game. They will let you do this, and those abilities become more frequent, more powerful, more common as you get into the high levels. Oh my gosh, with these stupid generators, she's going to die. I can't save her. So I failed that mini game, but I should be able to beat the elite boss without a problem. So, oh, maybe I'm not going to beat the elite boss. Yeah, we have to flee. So that was Dr. Lila's fault, right? She aggroed the elite boss while I was fighting the other guys. Every time she aggroed somebody, she forced a force field generator to come down, and I had to spend way too much time trying to hit the unhittable force field generators so that I couldn't back her up. That's why I hate NPCs following me around. So I could see, in an annoying mission like this, you might say, I want to skip that and stalk to the end. But most of the missions aren't annoying like this. Most missions are fun, and why would I want to skip the mission? Like, that doesn't even make any sense, right? At least not to me. I want to play the mission. On the other hand, if you get these cool special abilities, you want to use them, right? And so I've got Wish, let's cast it. Or Divine Intervention from the Cleric, and it just, your god comes in and fixes the problem for you. But all of those things, scrying and teleporting and Divine Intervention and so on, are allowing you to skip the game. Now, I would argue, maybe there's parts of the game you don't find fun. Maybe you don't like dungeon delving. Well, you don't skip the game. What you do is you tell your DM, I don't like dungeon delving. It's not as much fun. I'd rather do the social stuff. And then the DM will provide that for you, hopefully. Now, I don't know if we're going to be able to beat this guy because we don't have any really good inspirations, but we'll do the best we can. I'll try to confuse the other guy, but we missed him, of course. Oh, we got him. So yeah, I think Luke's point is very well taken. That one of the things the high-level abilities of games like D&D, Pathfinder, let you do is bypass parts of the game so that you don't have to do them anymore. And so the question is, well, don't have to do them anymore. Were these activities not fun in the first place? If they weren't fun, why are they in the game? And if they are in the game because they're fun, why would you want to skip them? Right? Is not going through dungeons, exploring rooms, finding treasure, and getting your way to the boss at the bottom of a 5-level dungeon fun? Why would you skip it? And yet, in this one story, the players did skip it. So presumably, either they don't realize they're breaking their own fun, or maybe they didn't find it fun. I don't really know. I find that stuff fun. And so, as a consequence, I don't want to skip it. And that's why with my Stalker, again, it's not a high-level ability, but I don't make it a habit of going into missions, sneaking all the way to the end, one-shotting the boss, and sneaking out. Because that wouldn't be any fun. That's not why I'm playing City of Heroes. I'm playing City of Heroes to play it, not to skip it. And so these are three things that happen when you have a level-based game and you have characters that are slotting into these ever-increasing abilities all the way up the chain, right, to the top. It's not freeform like Champions, where individual abilities can be vetoed easily by the GM, or where the GM can simply say, nobody's going over 60 active points, just buy other stuff. You kind of can't do. I mean, like, what's the GM going to say? Nobody can roll hit dice after 9th level? That's breaking the rules quite a bit. And so, because you have this increasing power level with character level in these level-based games, you have these three issues. One is you get so many abilities and access to things that let you bring in NPCs and stuff that it adds bog. Another is that it's very hard to balance. And the third is that it lets the players skip parts, maybe big chunks, of the content. It makes them, it's not like another, not just content, right? You're skipping elements of the game. Exploration, out the door. We don't need that anymore. We have scrying and teleport. Travel, out the door. We don't need that. We have scrying and teleport. Social interactions with merchants and negotiations, out the door. We have command and mind control powers, right? Finding somebody to identify magic items, out the door. We have legend lore, right? And so it, like, even that spell, legend lore, where you learn all of the, like, basically the research behind an item you're holding in your hand. Well, no, we don't need to go to libraries. No need to have an investigation check. You stop rolling skills and you're just casting your abilities now. So now the skill part of the game, out the door. Thief, what do we need him for to unlock things? We've got a wizard. He can just, cast knock, find traps. What do we need a rogue for? And so, all right, we'll skip all the skill-based parts of the game. Just have one guy with these spells, and he can basically bypass everything in the game, right? So now your high-level game is not playing D&D, right? Instead of playing D&D, all of it, your high-level play is essentially avoiding playing D&D, skipping D&D. Much like using a stalker, going to the end of the mission, kill the boss, come out, is skipping playing City of Heroes. So, I don't know what the solution to this problem is, really, other than go the Champions route and don't have a level-based game, right? There is Savage World is sort of, I think, in the middle on this, whereas the characters are freeform, but they will keep getting more powerful. There's sort of no way to avoid it. Their attributes will go up every rank. They can raise one of them, which is going to increase their toughness. If they raise vigor and stuff, it's going to increase their ability to soak wounds. It's going to increase their damage that they do. It's going to increase that stuff, right? Their skills will go up, so they'll hit more often and that sort of thing. There are powers, and some of those powers do things like the spells in D&D. But unlike D&D, the powers don't come automatically with levels, right? So, for instance, one of the things that I think I will probably do if I ever manage to find somebody to play Savage Worlds in the Harn World setting with me to keep it low magic is to say you can only get the new powers edge a few times total, right? Like once per rank, instead of any number of times you want. And so by the end of your character's career, you might only have access to 10 spells total, rather than 17 or 25 or however many you could do normally, right? And also the PowerPoints, gaining PowerPoints. It's it really is restrictive when you start with only 10 PowerPoints, and I'm going to regulate that too and say basically you can either take new powers or new PowerPoints at a given rank, but not both. And so by the end, you might have a dozen powers, but still only 10 PowerPoints, or you might have 20 PowerPoints, but you still only have your 3 original powers. It's not going to be that much. There are still game-breaking powers in the game, but you could potentially just ban that one power or regulate that one power, and the players can just pick other powers if they don't like that, right? And so I think it's not as easy to regulate this in Savage Worlds as it is in Champions, because they will be able to go up. They will get edges that are going to make them harder to kill and harder to wound and so on and so forth, and that's going to make it harder. But I think for the majority of Savage Worlds, what's happening is they're getting more powerful with the things you already do in Savage Worlds, but they're not skipping the types of play that you do in Savage Worlds. You're still making trait rolls. You're just rolling higher dice. You're still making skill checks. You're just rolling higher dice, right? You're still unshaking from shaken. You're still soaking wounds. You're just better at it, right? So you're not skipping being wounded. And even a low-ranking minion with a high roll on damage can take a player character down to incapacitated in one shot in Savage Worlds, because you never can take more than 3 wounds. And so because of those limitations, I think, although it's more susceptible to this than Champions, it's way less susceptible to this skipping the game effect than something like Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons. And by the way, Dungeons and Dragons has been like this all along, because teleporting and scrying and wish have existed since first edition, right? And this has been a vulnerability of level-based games ever since, because most level-based games are copied from D&D or based on D&D. And the only solution I've seen is a lot of the old school games and like Five Torches Deep just say, nope, you can't go to high level. You stop at 9. You stop at 10. You're done. That's retirement. And that's what the original D&D did, right? Original D&D, it wasn't a problem because you stopped at 10th level. It's going over 10th level where the game breaks. And I don't think Gary Gygax expected people to do a lot of play over 10th level other than building castles, right? And like if your character is building castles and being able to cast Wish, that might not be that big of a deal because you're not in a dungeon, right? But when you can cast Wish inside of a dungeon and just wish the dungeon to be done, right? I mean, we talked about, I think I talked about that at one point too, right? The one player who his wish was that every enemy the party was ever going to fight from now until the end of time would instantly be now defeated, so they didn't have to fight them. And I'm like, you're wishing not to play D&D. In character, that might be a really smart wish to do because your character wouldn't want to risk his life fighting. But as a player, don't you want to play these dungeons? Don't you want to do these? I mean, like, aren't we getting together every week to go on adventures? Why are you wishing the adventures to be over? Or that would be like me, not just with street missions, but with every mission, calling up my contacts and say, complete, 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 complete. Why am I here? Right? So I think this is a constant issue with these level-based games, and it is why the high-level game can be a struggle. And it's why, for me, I decided I'm done with my campaign by level 13, because I didn't want to deal with scrying and teleport and wish and all of this stuff, those like content skipping, game breaky type stuff that comes with level 7, 8, and 9 spells and the very high level 14 plus abilities that player characters get. It just made me not want to even run that. And I don't think I'm alone. And one of the complaints Luke has, and this is the only other thing I'll mention for 1D&D, is that he doesn't see any evidence in what they're putting out that they're doing anything about this fact that the high-level game is unmanageable. And it breaks itself, basically. So hopefully the guys at Wizards of the Coast are going to realize this, but I don't know. Since the majority of their player base stops by level 6, they may not even realize this is an issue because there aren't enough people to complain about it. Feel free to leave comments down below, especially leave comments as to if you did the little mini game we did where I said go ahead and pause it and come up with your reasons. If you have any why the high-level game is kind of broken, go ahead and post those, and we'll see how much it matches up with what Luke and I have said. Until next time, I'm Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes on the Rebirth server. Let's rant with Scrapperlock.